You buy a thing. Let's say your screen breaks. That's pretty common. Of course you should be able to repair the item you own. Repair saves the user money. If just the screen is broken and the entire rest of the phone is still functional, then it's way cheaper to replace the screen than to buy a whole new phone. But also, it saves the environment. So instead of creating unnecessary e-waste, throwing out a perfectly usable thing because one broken part, just keep using the thing as long as it works. And also the fact is, not everybody needs brand new phones. So if you someday want to upgrade to a new phone, somebody else can benefit from that used phone with probably just a few replaced parts. That means that the manufacturers, the companies that are making these things are on the complete opposite side of that equation. They're gonna want control. So I asked Louis Rossmann about this. This is what he told me.
How you doing?
I'm all right. So starting to move forward with the right to repair thing a bit more seriously than before.
Yeah, I saw you were trying to get it at least as a ballot initiative in someplace. But I saw a video of it, and I think there was an article that I read where you were trying to move to get people actually voting on it.
Louis Rossmann, who has been a huge advocate for right to repair and operates his own repair shop, has a GoFundMe going to get a direct ballot initiative published in Massachusetts. Hopefully, this will lead to the push that's needed for right to repair to become a reality in the electronic space. He will be working with the same firm that managed to get right to repair pushed to a direct ballot initiative for the automotive industry, which, as you'll remember from my examples, is a space where right to repair actually freaking exists.
Yeah, I've been noticing for the past 5 to 7 years, it's been following this pattern where every time we show up, we speak to all the politicians, they're all excited about it, some aren't, we get to a hearing, we talk I talk for 1 minute, the opposition talks for 1 minute, I'm not allowed to talk after the opposition talks, and then there's like 1 or 2 people that decide that they don't want to do it later, and then it just gets scrapped until next year. And it's kind of like they keep stringing you along and making you think like, if only you get this one person on board, or if only you made this one argument that you didn't make, you'll get it. And I kind of got tired of it. And my audience said, perhaps what you should do is figure out how they did this for cars. Because last year, they did it for cars and they won by 75% on the ballot. And they didn't have to deal with any of this, begging politicians to consider it as a law, and then they pretend to care about it, and then it kind of gets swept under the rug later. So I asked the firm that I got that passed, how they got it passed, what it would take to get it passed, and they made, and it was a Brian Hickey Associates in Massachusetts, and I looked through their record. They seem to win on every single initiative that they take on almost. And they said we spent $25 million on that one. You'd probably be looking at $5 to $20 million. You may get lucky because you have a large social media following, so you don't really have to use all the.
Is this statewide or is this nationwide for what you're?
It would be statewide. Okay. But the thing is, once it gets passed in a state like a state that has Harvard and MIT and everybody, it winds up passing. It winds up being effective nationwide. Like you can't sell a chip in Massachusetts and that chip doesn't make its way to Connecticut if someone needs it, or you can't sell a schematic in Massachusetts that doesn't somehow make its way to the internet in 2021. Yeah. So like that's what happened with the car stuff. Like once the car stuff was passed in Massachusetts, they just kind of changed the way they dealt with repair shops around the country. So they gave me their spiel, and I started my fundraiser. And now I'm at this kind of fork in the road where I have 3 possibilities. So out of the 5 to 20 million, I raised about 700 or 800K. I think it's pretty cool. A month and a half and 700K. That's more than I think the Repair Association has raised over 6 or 8 years of doing nothing but this. I raised them. So I'm very grateful for it. But I have like 3 choices here. So the first choice is continue fundraising and pray that I get the rest. The second choice is continue fundraising, but say I'm going to do a ballot initiative regardless of whether I raise the right amount of money. And the third is to, if I don't raise enough, just do standard traditional lobbying for the bills that are existing in all the states right now. So that's not a direct ballot initiative, but so that amount of money we could have a lobbyist in every single state in the U.S. that has a bill. Because in all the states where this has failed, there was no lobbyist. I think New York is the only state that's ever had a right to repair lobbyist there. The risk of doing it if you don't have the requisite money is you can't.
When you say requisite money, is this like money for advertising and everything for your issue, or what exactly is this money being spent on? Just so I understand what you mean when you say.
A lot of it is spent on polling, advertising, advocacy, actually getting signatures, because you need to get, I think, 80,000 signatures once and then like 100,000 or something like that again. So like it's a lot of money to just get that many signatures, especially in the time of COVID, like just having people knock on doors. And but a lot of it is polling and advertising. So you have to figure out when the opposition releases an ad that's not true, which demographic believes it and why. And then you have to target that same demographic again to create an ad that explains why the
gotcha.
other ad is not true.
We're talking about like okay.
Yeah, so the issue is this. When I do standard lobbying and I fail, even if I fail to get a bill passed, I always get to say at the end of it, the reason it didn't pass is because they had 30 lobbyists show up and probably, make contributions, and then it didn't get through. But I still get to maintain that my position was the majority opinion. This is the one that's popular, people want it, it makes sense. But if I fail at a ballot initiative, then I don't get to say that anymore, because then I lose that.
Failing one of these hard would probably impede some future efforts for a while, I imagine, right?
It would destroy it for good, because then when you go to a politician in another state, not only are your re-election campaigns going to be compromised because everybody's going to fund the opposition since you were in favor of right to repair, but also the people didn't. They're going to say, look, the people voted against this. So if I wind up screwing the pooch to where I do a ballot initiative, I do it haphazardly and I fail, not only would I not be able to say that people are in favor of right to repair, not only would I not be able to say that, you're going to have a miserable life in a political career as a result of voting for this, but people aren't even for it anymore. I lose the ability to say that.
Yeah.
Which is, and that's a concern that some people who are already in this space have, which is they've said, you go for it, but just know if you lose, you destroy our ability to win all around the country. And that's kind of...
I'm curious, from a macro level, what do you think is keeping the right from repair stuff back the most? Because I have a guess, and then but I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm curious what your answer is.
I think what keeps it back the most is that we don't have there's nobody there to answer legislator questions in a lot of the areas where there are bills that are introduced. Or once everybody is gung-ho about it, for some reason, it just gets slow-walked and disappears.
Why do you think it gets slow-walked and disappears, though? Like, what do you think explains the fundamental lack of, interest from politicians to, really pursue it?
I don't know, and I tried to get a straight answer from a senator that I spoke to, assemblywoman that I spoke to about 3 or 4 days ago, and we did a conference call. Someone said that, I can't believe you asked, this is so not tactful of you. But I asked, I said, you keep saying that high-powered lobbyists that have money behind them make it difficult. So I said, what about that makes it difficult? Can you give me the specifics? I'm just asking because I raised $700,000, and I'd like to know where how does money make a bad argument a good argument? Everybody just thinks it's an envelope that gets tossed under the door, but life is always more complex than people think it is, and I'd really like to know what it is, because I have this pile of money over here, and I'd like to know how can I put that to work to get something passed. And all she said is that that it winds up being slow walked or killed in committee, or someone, or everybody will decide to vote on something else, and this won't make it they'll say we'll do this next session. So I think it's happening quietly behind closed doors. I don't know what the conversation is that goes on, and I don't know the specific motivations. But the reason I wanted to go for the ballot initiative is I was just sick and tired of after 6 or 7 years
as a rider on a bill or something.
Yeah, and we're at a point right now where if it doesn't pass in the next 1 or 2 or 3 years, I think the industry will have changed enough that it doesn't really matter. If you get this passed by 2024, 2026, I don't think there's going to be an independent repair industry by then at the rate that things are going. So I've kind of had more incentive to just go for broke and see what I can accomplish.
If so I've changed, my political stuff has changed a lot over the past few years. So if I had to guess on this, I think that a lot of politics is actually pretty simple. It actually is way more simple than people think, but I think it's simple in ways that people don't like to hear. I think that if I had to guess what the big issue on this was, I think that the big issue that people don't want to say is that it's just not a huge thing that's driving voter interest. It's not something that a lot of people are generally thinking about. So it's it just kind of fades from everybody's mind because it's not something that the average human is like thinking about. Yeah, that's it. I really think it's that simple.
I agree.
Think something that you mentioned, I've seen you mention this in a video. I think it's a really good angle to go for, is pointing out that I think that getting off right, and I'm spitballing here because you've been more in this than I am, so I could be wrong. But I think that getting off of like things like iPhones and focusing on things like tractors might get you wider appeal. I don't know if it will work in New York though, just because then it makes it sound like it's an attack on farmers or whatever, and there's a lot of people that could be roped into believing that. And I know John Deere and whatnot had issues with that. But yeah, it feels like, because how many people ever go to like an actual like repair shop to get like a phone or something repaired, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you. The thing that I've said is, every time we discuss this, there's then a discussion of immigration or healthcare or COVID relief, military spending. Like, those are the hot button issues that get people to the polls, or arguing over Dr. Seuss or whatever the hell showed up on Tucker Carlson that night. That's the stuff that gets people riled up.
Yeah.
Not this. So it always just kind of gets swept under the rug at some point. But even when it is at a point where there's interest in it and it really is this seems to make sense and everybody agrees on it, it kind of winds up it doesn't get anywhere, and it's always something stupid that kills it. And one thing I remember was in 2017, when I went to Nebraska for that bill, we were supposed to speak to a senator the day before the hearing, and he canceled last minute. There was an AT&T lobbyist that spoke there, and then when we went to followthemoney.org, we saw that about 2 or 3 days before the meeting, that senator got $3,200. Now, like, $3,200 is not really a lot of money, so it's hard to really link the two. But it's just stuff like that. It kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It encourages the conspiratorial thinking that I think that a lot of people have nowadays.
Sure, yeah, I can understand that. Oftentimes, a lot of money flows to things that people kind of already assume to be true anyway. There's a really interesting article by a guy that does a blog called the Slate Star Codex, because a lot of people are kind of under the assumption that, like, well, if you just bribe politicians, like, you can get whatever you want passed. But when you look at the amount of money that actually flows in these industries, it's actually not that much. Kind of like you said, like, you might see like a donation of like $5,000 or $10,000, which is like, in the grand scheme of things, actually like a pretty small amount of money. Like, most like large YouTubers or whatever could like throw this around and not really care that much. So you'd think you could get stuff passed really easily. But I think what ends up happening is like money kind of more, it doesn't seem like it, but I think it kind of more organically flows through things that kind of like has voter interest anyway. And then especially right now with like all the COVID stuff and everything you're talking about, like there's just so many like people with eyes on these types of issues that when it comes to right to repair, it's so much harder.
Yeah, the thing, when I first looked at that, on one hand, I thought, this is really strange that he canceled the meeting a few days after getting $3,200. But then at the same time, I think, you're a senator that's been 20 years in the private sector. Like, what's $3,200?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that I have more integrity than him or anything, but just from a money standpoint, like, $3,200 is really not enough money to get me to change my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And we could, if it came down to bribery, like, we could raise more than that. I mean, like, if that's what it's going to be. Yeah.
There's this one guy, Bo of the Fifth Column, that's his name. Yeah, in his channel, he did a piece on this Ted Cruz article where he did the math, and he said, he had talked about getting like $2.9 million or something over 10 or 11 years, and he was just thinking, that's $290,000 a year. Like, that's pretty cheap to buy a popular senator. And like, that was his thinking about it, and it's just that it kind of got me wondering. But yeah, so like, I'm at a crossroads of, do I go for direct ballot without the proper amount of money, and if I screw it up for the entire nation for good, and become the person that made right to repair a pariah issue just because he was too impatient, or like, do I use that money to which is more than enough for like 5 years of lobbying in every state, so that there's actually a chance of winning in any one of the states where we constantly lose, because it's not even like we have a poorly funded lobbyist, or we have, outside of New York, there's just no lobbyist. Or
something I'm really curious about. Have you ever reached out? I don't know if I think he's still running. Have you ever reached out to Yang's campaign and asked him about this?
I did, but I think I went about it the wrong way. I spoke to people that work for his campaign and got completely gatekept the same way. It's kind of like, if the way I felt while I was speaking to them was the way I think people who are YouTube subscribers to me feel when they walk into my store and Kevin says, I'm sorry, Lewis is not here right now, when I'm clearly in the back of the store and I'm visible. Like, he's trained to always say that because I'm in the middle of doing a video, like a board repair video or something. If I actually walked out every time that happened, I would never do a board repair video. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I understand.
So he's just like, they were very nice people, but they seemed to have zero interest in this whatsoever. So I think I could possibly speak to him if I tried to reach out to him as a like, you know, did a video and said, "Hi, I have 1 million subscribers. Would you like to talk about your mayoral campaign?" But the normal way of going through it, like the quote proper way, with not just DMing him directly and actually going through his campaign, was kind of a waste of time.
I'm trying to think, because like I can think of like so many things. I think of the tractor thing because it makes the most sense in my state. I try to think of like if there's like an issue that I have that I want like an average voter to care about. I try to think of like what are things that, how can I make it relevant to somebody? So like I'm thinking of like, have you ever heard anything about insulin pumps?
Some, yeah. I spoke to someone about the medical stuff recently.
Oh yeah, because there's a really interesting. I don't know if people still talk about this. There's like a really interesting movement at some point for like aftermarket insulin pumps with like open source software, where the idea was there were people that are working on these kind of like, they're working on this open source code for insulin pumps that regulates your blood sugar way more effectively than kind of like the first party ones do. I don't know how much it would play into this here, but it's something to think about. And then I know there's like the car stuff. You know, like I'm a big fan of like car shit. You know, I've like flashed my ECU. I know that some car companies don't like that, or they'll void your warranty if they find out that you've done that.
The car stuff was easy because every single person that had ever dealt with a dealer in Massachusetts from the polling had a horrible experience. So the ads landed really poorly. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of trying to figure out if this is an issue that they care about. So I hired the same polling firm that they were using a different firm's money, not the GoFundMe money, to see, like. And I wanted to do just a basic, a few polls and focus groups to figure out how do people actually feel about this. Is this something they care about, or is this something where it's like, you know, what is that? Before, and I was gonna try and figure out how to make a decision before then, which is, you know, do it without the money, do normal lobbying, or just like hold out for some, you know, very you know, some Silicon Valley guilty conscious billionaire to say, here, win.
Here's my pet project.
Yeah.
How in general, I guess when you poll on it, like how do people tend to feel about it?
Well, there's one poll that US Perg did that they showed me. 47% of the people polled, I think, supported it and said, yes, I would. This is an important issue. About 1% said, no, I'm opposed to it. And then 52% said, what is this issue? What are you talking about? Gotcha. So I'm I'm going to be doing the second poll now. I mean, the one that we want to do about the bill and focus groups in the next coming weeks. The first one is around, I think, May 27th, May 28th. We're starting with that. So in the meantime, I'm trying to get this out. I think that the main thing I have to focus on is that 53%, because the 47%.
So, real quick, my question on that is: do you weight those polls by age? Because the thing that might suck too is it might be 53% of respondents don't know about it, but if you break that out into who actually votes, it comes out to be like 85% of people that actually vote don't know about it. Because I'm guessing that's probably weighted like pretty heavily towards younger people.
Yeah, the polling company, I don't know if they were tooting their own horn to try to, you know, to obviously try to get paid and make money, or how true this is, but they were very, the direct way to put it is they were implying that all the places that you would think of to advertise are not where old people who actually vote are looking. So, I mean, if you have a YouTube, you know, if you have Linus or Marques Brownlee or Jerry Rig Everything or whatever, talk about right to repair, you know, the 70-year-old person that lives in Somerville is not watching that in Massachusetts. Which is which probably is true. You know, I think I read a few articles about that when it came to Bernie, and people thought that, you know, Bernie was absolutely going to win the primary and everything else by a large blowout. And the reality is that he didn't poll that well with older voters, and older voters were the ones that actually take the time to vote.
Way disproportionately, yeah.
I mean, especially if they're retired. I mean, voting isn't a holiday in the country, so you don't get off work for it, which means there's an excuse to not do it. Whereas if you're retired and you have nothing to do all day, it's, well, you know, just might as well walk over and vote.
And if you are going to do this as like a ballot initiative, you're set on New York has to be the place where it's going to happen?
I did it in Massachusetts because New York doesn't do ballot initiatives, okay. And I chose them because it won twice there. So for two reasons. First, the market there is large enough that I'm not risking a company saying we're not going to sell in Massachusetts, because that would be suicide. You have MIT, Harvard, all the rich people in Cambridge. It's like you can't not sell in Massachusetts. But the second reason was whether it's the philosophy of the voters or the way their legal system works, whatever it is, they already have the framework in place for a law like this to be passed and for it to work, because they already did it in 2012 and 2020 with the automotive industry. The bill that I would be presenting is virtual copy and paste of the automotive right to repair bill from 2012 and its amendment in 2020. So in 2012, they passed the bill that I have right now, except with the word car instead of consumer electronics in it, and it went through. And then in 2020, there was another direct ballot campaign that was done by this firm, and that was to close a loophole. So there was a loophole in the bill where they only had to provide everything for wired diagnostics, not wireless. So the scare, and I'm probably going to get some of this wrong because I don't really work on cars, is that if they were to move the diagnostics over to wireless, then they would not have to provide independent repair shops with the means, tools, manuals, or anything in order to be able to figure out what the error codes are with the car. And the fear was that with more manufacturers moving over to wireless, they would be able to get around the loophole in that bill. So that's why. So the right to repair for automotive passed in 2012, and then they closed the loophole that allowed them to ignore the bill for wireless in 2020, and it passed both times with the majority, and it was a complete blowout. It was like 75 to 25.
Gotcha. And then, okay, so then, I'm sorry, because every time first of all, the entire Northeast is just the same state to me, because I'm from the Midwest and the other was. And then I associate heavily with all the polling and everything you said you've done so far has all been for Massachusetts.
Yeah, the poll that I saw from US Perg was in Massachusetts. And the next poll that I'm going to be doing is in Massachusetts as well.
I was going to ask, is there any way you can get like any of the car people on board with helping? But they probably don't care that much, I'm guessing, right?
Not much, although this is the same firm that did the car bill, so I mean, I imagine they know a lot of the same resources, and I mean, they have a lot of the same resources handy. They got the police commissioner because they figured out that he was very trusted to do a commercial telling people that the car company commercials were BS. So there's like their network of people that I could reach out to that may be open to helping, because I put in a lot of work to help them get their bill passed. So as the anti-right to repair commercials were coming out in Massachusetts, I would do a video and showcase, here's why this is incorrect. You should, here's why these arguments are untrue. So I think I helped them a decent amount with their campaign, and I'm hoping to be able to get some of that goodwill back.
Yeah. I guess as one consolation, if you do lose, if it's really close, I mean, that might be a stronger argument to push it forward even more in the future too, right? I'm pretty sure that we'd lost several times across the country on ballot initiatives before it finally started to pass. So like if you did do it and it came out like 48% in favor of something, right? That might get like a lot more interest generated, maybe.
Yeah, the worst one that they showed me was one where I think it was ranked choice, where they were ahead and then they lost at the end, and the amount of money spent, I think it was like $5 to $10 million spent in favor of ranked choice voting, which I thought was a popular position, and then $80,000 or $8,000 spent against it, and the against won, and I just thought that's insane. Yeah. But it also kind of gave me hope that if I show up with 700K and the opposition shows up with 50 million, that if I poll well enough in the beginning, and I get enough people on board with the idea early on that it doesn't matter if the opposition is 30 million. Because what I've been thinking is, what if the firm is incorrect in saying that you need this much money to win? Like I've been thinking of it in terms of, what if it's kind of like a boxing match? Like all you need is enough money to be, to get the cab ride to the place. Like if I have $10 million and Mike Tyson has $100, he's still gonna kill me. All he needs is enough money to pay for his train ticket to get down to the boxing match with me.
The money spent part is more like it's like what you're looking for is like money to bring awareness or change people's minds. It's not like a one-to-one, like if we just spend this much we'll win, right? It's more like raising awareness. And
yeah, it's a lot of it is awareness and polling. And I was looking through the budget that they had for their last campaign, and they were doing a poll like twice a week, because every time a new ad would come out, they would have to figure out, did this work? And who did it work on? Yeah. Because what they said is that you're not allowed to lie in your advertising, and because you get fined for it in Massachusetts, and there's a big fines for it, and nobody cares. Because if this legislation is going to cost them $100 or $500 million, if they get fined $2 million because they create a false advertisement, they don't care, because the amount that they have to lose if the bill passes is far greater than the fine. So they said you should expect that the ads that come out are not at all factually based, that you should expect that they be slanderous, you should expect that they're horrible, and you have to figure out if those ads hit, meaning that they change the mind of a voter, and how did they change the mind of that voter, and specifically which demographics did they change the mind of, so that you know how to counter it. So they were doing those once or twice a week because they had so many ads coming out, like, you're going to get in a parking lot if people have access to the the ODB port on your car and all those types of
I
ridiculous
saw
crap.
that commercial on your channel, I think. Yeah, with the car burglar or whatever, and like this is what happens when right through. Yeah, the way they were framing that was insane.
Predator could use the data to stalk their victims, pinpoint exactly where you are, whether you are alone, even take control of your vehicle.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and like he said, we got lucky because their ads were horrible and they weren't landing with voters. And even though they weren't landing with voters, they just kept spending more money to have similar ads created, and they were bad. But like, it wouldn't really be that hard to make an anti right to repair ad, especially if I was heading a campaign. Like, you just go to my channel. I think right now my YouTube rewind on my channel is like a video of me trying to find a short and a board going on fire. I mean, like, there's so much content there to go through. Like, there's ads for days, and I'm kind of curious to figure out how people feel about it now before I go ahead. But I'm a little cautious or hesitant because I have to decide by July or August if I'm going to file for it. And if I go for it and I go for it without the requisite money, I'm kind of thinking that the way this, I think the story of my channel over the past 5 or 8 years has kind of been, here's how to do something that you're not supposed to do. Like, I barely graduated high school. I had to cheat on my chemistry exams. I'm not certified in any of this stuff. And the Apple Store says you can't repair boards, and other repair businesses said it's impossible to do it economically in the United States. I was like, all right, cool. Let me see if I can figure out how to do this myself. And I sit here until 4 a.m. every day, and I explore and I bang my head against the wall. And as I'm figuring it out, I'm also showing everybody else how I'm figuring it out and then teaching them. And I'm kind of curious, should I take that approach with a political campaign, or am I biting off more than I can chew by trying to figure out how to run a $25 million campaign with $700,000?
It's just, the issue is that, like, when we're talking about, like, voting, it's just, like, a whole other animal from everything else. Because, like, you were trying to, like, win influence on the internet or get, like, a certain amount of people to believe something, like, nationally or internationally. Like, there's, like, so many ideas, but that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to get people in Massachusetts on board with, like, this particular thing, and everything about that is just so much different than everything that we traditionally do on the internet, right?
Yeah, particularly because it's a local group, and again, a lot of the people that vote are people that are not watching,
YouTube,
Linus, Marques.
There's like, I bet
Rossman.
like that the lockpicking lawyer guy, like in Linus, you said, like, I bet there's like so many people online that you could get that would be like in favor of working on this program. But like you said, at the end of the day, like, I don't know how many people in Massachusetts, how many older voters in Massachusetts are going to be watching any of this,
Yeah.
Which just makes everything so much harder. Yeah.
Someone in your chat said chemistry is not a real subject. Well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah. I mean, like, it seems like you should probably go for it, right?
Yeah, I think perhaps I'm just seeking confirmation bias to go for it.
I mean, like, there's going to be people. I don't think the internet thinks far enough ahead to blame you. Like, oh, if it fails, he's ruined it for everybody. Unless, like, some other YouTuber comes out with that narrative and then people start copying it. Like,
yeah, because like the safe thing to do would be to just use that money to go for initiatives in existing states and see what happens with that. Because the most I've ever put into this was a few $1,000 to travel around the country and carry my camera. I've never actually put money into lobbyists in other states. But I just I feel like that approach is just going to constantly get brushed off and rushed under the table, and maybe in 2050 you'll get a right to repair bill. In Hawaii, they actually said there's a right to repair bill in Hawaii. It was a year and a half ago, and in the text they said we will revisit this by 2050.
yeah.
I'm not kidding. I read it and I just like I wanted to cry. I was laughing instead of crying, but it said by 2050, and I thought, oh,
Nice.
So it'll be done. At least it'll be done before the rail.
Yeah. True.
I could see my girlfriend actually lift her fist up in aggravation because she's. Are you familiar with the rail project in Hawaii?
Not in Hawaii, but I know there's a lot of rail projects that people try to get working all over the country. That
they have a rail that they've spent like tens of billions of dollars on, and how much have they done already, Erica? Like
25 miles. That's it.
So they did 22 miles of rail. Oh, the whole project is 22 miles, and how much do they do? Like 100 feet or so? Yeah. Well, I gotta go. The call that I was about to do is here. Thank you so much. You gave me a lot to chew on. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your perspective and your time.
Good luck. Be careful, man. Anytime.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.
Destiny, click www.imager.com,